It's the Draftsmen Show.
Hey Stan, my name is Jared. I'm currently a student in college studying drawing and animation. My dream is to work for Disney Animation Studios. So my question is, what kind of variety of drawings should I be adding to my portfolio now in order to get the best career after school? Thanks.
I just interviewed Aaron Blaze, and one of the questions in that interview was, what kind of portfolio should animators have? And he answered that question. So go watch my interview with Aaron Blaze. It's already out.
I've got it queued up, and I started to watch it, and I have not had a chance to finish it. But he'd be one of the first people to go to.
He says basically what he would like to see is, if you're going for an animator position, don't submit bouncing balls and all the stuff that they teach you at school. Don't submit your homework. Submit actual projects that you did on your own, showing that you could tell a story through body language. Show them that you're a good actor. You can bring life to a character. Don't show them that you know follow through and anticipation. Like, these things could be learned in a few months. Show them that you got what they actually need, which is telling a story, bringing characters to life.
Ralph Bakshi, years ago, was asked about how do you get a career as an animator, and he said, do an animation. Do some animations. Show people what you can do. And that in his time, it was almost impossible to do that. You had to get a couple $100,000 to fund it. Now you can do it on your laptop. Now you can do it with tools that are readily available. And I think he said that around 2009, 2010 to a group of animators. But there's the first thing, is learn to animate, and then prove that you can animate by doing some pieces, and then seek work. And if you're seeking to do this at the level of Disney, well, it wouldn't hurt to know Disney's animation history and to read Frank and Ollie's book, The Illusion of Life. And there's just so many resources. You can live in the commentaries on the DVDs and the extras and the history of it and all of that other stuff to learn about what the evolution of Disney Studios was, which is interesting in its own right. For full animation, if you may know who Stephen Chiodo is. Stephen Chiodo and his brothers have been one of the most respected stop-motion animation studios in Hollywood. He's the guy who animated Large Marge in Pee-wee's Big Adventure. Do you know what I'm talking about? The truck
I know Pee-wee.
Truck driver woman that turned into a monster. It was an amazing moment in film.
And when they finally pulled the driver's body from the twisted, burning wreck, it looked like this.
He animated that. He animated the narwhal in Elf that says, that wishes him the best.
Okay.
Yeah. And Stephen Chiodo and his brothers wrote and animated they made a film called Killer Clowns from Outer Space, which has a cult following. I have not yet seen it.
I've seen it.
But I know people really, really care about this thing. He has come to speak to my students, and he talked about how he was thinking of doing a stop-motion animation course, but he said that Richard Williams' animation course essentially teaches everything you need, except you just apply it to stop motion instead of to hand-drawn animation. And I've watched that Richard Williams course 6 or 7 times with students. I think it's a great course. I'm not even an animator, but he teaches you, he talks about the sophisticated use of the basics, and that you just learn the basics of animation. And then all the greatest animation is essentially just taking those basics and evolving them into whatever else you're going to do. And he covers most of it, almost all of it, in that Richard Williams Animator Survival Kit Animated. So it's the video version of it as opposed to the book. But that's not about having a career.
Yeah, I mean, he's asking about a portfolio.
That's putting together your skills.
In a portfolio. But I want to say, you're asking about what drawings to put in a portfolio. I guess that's if you're trying to get into 2D animation. Make sure your portfolio is very, very specific for the job you're applying for. You know, if you're applying to work for Cartoon Network, don't show them a bunch of 3D stuff that you worked. Make sure you can show them that you can design characters, you can animate in that style. Just make sure that you know what they're actually looking for. Make it easy for them to choose you.
Yeah. Cody Shank is an example in my life. Cody was in my perspective class in 2014, I think it was. And Then that online school ended, but every time I would come into the online perspective class, he would be there early and he would have caricatures of 1960s TV show characters. And I thought, this guy knows...
Like actors, right? Caricatures of
Yeah,
humans?
caricatures of actors
Okay.
from Hogan's Heroes and things like that. He was born in the 1990s, so this is stuff 30 years before his time, but I recognized all this stuff. And so when the school ended and I kept in touch with him, I even met with his parents on Skype and talked with him about doing an internship. He had this love of retro work from the 50s and 60s, which included Jay Ward Productions, Rocky and Bullwinkle and that kind of thing, which I like that style of animating. And I proposed to them that if he were to intern with me, that he would work on an animation. And so he did that. We worked.
Are you talking about the PROKO?
Yeah, that was the thing for you.
Which
And
hasn't been released yet.
it hasn't been released yet.
That's for the perspective course.
Yeah, so
which
we can
is
always
gonna
cut
come
this
out in 2037.
Yeah, right. We can always cut this out if it's not
No,
appropriate.
it's going in.
But
But there is a very, very good animation that's ready to be published when the perspective course comes out
Yes.
that Cody Shank made. I love that cartoon.
and he was not an animator before. He took one or two of the online classes in animating. And before we did this internship, I sat down with Dave Prooksma. Dave Prooksma is one of the great Disney animators. We taught at the same school. He animated Mrs. Potts, Angela Lansbury's character, and lots of other Disney stuff. And I said, look, I've got a guy who wants to get good at limited animation. He's going to do an internship where it's going to be like that Rocky and Bullwinkle stuff. I said, any thoughts about this? He said, the first thing he should do is learn to animate. And that means learn the stuff that the Disney animators and others were developing so much in the 1930s.
Right. Learn the fundamentals.
Yes.
But the portfolio doesn't show that you don't have to show your fundamental studies.
Yes. Okay, but let me carry through with
Right?
this. He said that the great limited animation in television at the time, this would include Hanna-Barbera stuff, it's not full feature animation. They couldn't do full feature animation because they didn't have the time to work on something for 2 years. They got to crank these things out every week. But he said those animators who came from feature animation, doing stuff for Warner Brothers and MGM and Disney, they were good animators. So then when they go to TV and they got to cut corners and make it simpler, they know what they're doing as animators and they just find inventive ways to do it simpler. So I told Cody about this and he understood, but we figured let's do a little bit of a shortcut, watch a lot of these Rocky and Bullwinkle fractured fairy tales and these kinds of things that they do. And Cody did that and did it until he wired the style of that kind of drawing. And then, bit at a time, we worked for almost 3 years by way of Skype. I've never even met Cody in person
Yeah,
yet.
me either.
But we worked on it bit at a time, storyboarding it out, getting the voices in there, and then he pulled it off. And the result of this is that without the world knowing who he is yet, you started hiring him as an animator, and doesn't he do? I mean, he does most of your 2D animation.
Yeah,
now.
and then anatomy courses. I think halfway through we start replacing some of the skelly stuff with more 2D animation, and he's the one that does all that. Yeah.
But I admire Cody just because he's been a joy to work with, and he's a hard worker, and he's talented, and he liked that style. So you find somebody who says, I love the 1960s style. Okay, that doesn't mean we're going to be pulling you away from doing this. We're going to find a way to co-travel. And that is a little microcosm of the way many a story is told, that you learn how to do it, you show people, you got to get good enough to do it regularly. That's one of the things that can be a problem. If you take 3 years to do an animation and then somebody hires you to do it and you've got to get it done in a month or two, you've got a problem. So doing the slow motion thing to learn how to do it, then doing another one, and say, now I'm ready to start meeting deadlines instead of just pulling it off.
Oh, yeah. I guess you're saying if you're going to be applying for a job, make sure you're actually ready to apply. Don't just try to put together a strong portfolio.
Yeah. In the industry, there used to be a nickname, and I won't mention the name of the school, but other people have publicly, that they called it the name of that school problem, which is that you spend a year doing an illustration that is so awesome, and then nobody can hire you to do that illustration because you need 1 year to do it.
Yeah.
So you never learn to be a professional by doing it on deadline, but it's okay to spend a year or more doing an animation if that's where you're learning the craft.
Low, doo, 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 low, doo, 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 low, doo.